Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Welcome to the channel. It's a new channel. What I want to spend some time today talking about is how I've helped over 40 companies, recruitment companies, but this applies to all businesses, generate millions in new revenue across the board in under 2 years. So these were established businesses, but I've helped transform them and get them much higher revenues and higher margins. And I want to share today some of those lessons learned that maybe you can apply to your business. So look, thank you for joining. This is a new channel. It's something I haven't done before. I've wanted to do it for quite some time, if I'm honest. Been a little bit nervous, but aren't we all? But got to jump in at some point. So very used to speaking to a live audience and presenting, but this is odd if I'm being totally honest. Just talking essentially to myself and hopefully the viewers yourselves that are watching. So why should you listen to me? Why have you hopefully stumbled across this channel and this video? So let me just give you a quick insight to who I am, what I do, and maybe how I can share some knowledge, lessons learned that you can maybe apply to your business or whatever it is you do. So my name's Stuart Juggins. I've been a business consultant independently for the past 6+ years. I've been in business for well over 25 years. I have built and developed many organisations, many businesses for my own. I continue to own a couple of companies myself. One of those is obviously a consultancy, another one is a SaaS business. But in essence, what I do is I go into companies and I specialise on doing, one thing really, which is transforming and evolving their existing revenue streams to higher, more performing, more lucrative revenues and margins. And there's a certain process that I go through to do that. I've developed a pretty robust framework over the past, 6-7 years. And prior to that, I used to do this at senior level. I used to lead multi-million pound organisations and divisions for some of the largest companies in the world in this space. So look, hopefully you're going to find this of interest. I don't have a script. I don't script what I talk about. I just like to think about things on the fly. I've got a couple of bullet points over here that I'm looking at that I want to share with you. But all of this is about just going through the process. I want to share some lessons learned. I want this to feel more interactive rather than scripted and, just high production. You can see I'm sat in my office. It's currently 2:00. So I've got my cup of tea with me. Very British thing to do, of course. So if you're watching from outside of the UK, you probably know how well we are for our tea. So look, let me jump into the whole premise of this video, right? Which is how I've helped, dozens and dozens of businesses generate not hundreds of thousands in revenue, but millions in new revenue streams. And not just normal margin position, but much higher margins. So what I really focus on with my clients and what I would like to get across to you today is how you can really work whatever industry you're in. As I mentioned, I predominantly focus on the recruitment sector, so recruitment and staffing, very much professional services space. But this applies to any type of business. The more service oriented you are, the better. But it applies to product driven businesses as well. So let's get through it, right? So the first thing I would say that I typically find when I go into an organization, and the process, the program I run, something I've developed over the years, I call Accelerate and Elevate, or I abbreviate it to A&E. I don't know why that is called A&E. I don't know how I came up with that, but it obviously conjures up the whole hospital visiting, triage, pain. And that's how I view going into clients. That's what I get pulled in to do, is to really help them accelerate and elevate. So the first problem is focus. They do not have a focus on understanding their clients intimately. So, and I've seen this outside of recruitment, and I've seen it in quite a few places. When I step into my client organizations, I'm helping them win better business with their end clients. So those could be financial services, those could be banks, those could be healthcare, renewable energy. It could be any market. Now, what I mean by understanding their clients, they're just looking at transacting. They're providing a service. That service is very human. They're providing recruitment services. They're finding the right candidates. They're screening those candidates against what the client thinks they need. And what they think they need is to hire an individual, right? And that may well be correct. But what we need to do is we need to understand our clients better. And there's a common theme that this all comes back to, which is problems. What problems are our clients facing? What problems are our businesses facing? How can we service those better? So when I'm going into my clients, and if you're looking at your business and thinking about, well, how do I look at increasing revenues? How do I look at increasing margins? The first thing has to start with, well, who are we selling to? Do we intimately understand them? And I don't just mean to say that we know what role they play in their business, but do we understand what problems they're going to face, what challenges they're coming across on a day-to-day basis, what strategies they've got ahead of them, where are they looking, in the next 6, 12, 18 months? What are business drivers? What are personal drivers? All of these things come back to understanding our client intimately. And you may have heard the term before, ICP, ideal client profile or persona. And it's all about that. It's all about honing what is that ICP. Who is that individual? What problems do they have? How can I service them? So the next thing that leads on to that, once we've started honing, what client our stakeholder looks like, and remember, that's not just the business. So if I'm going into a bank, for example, and I'm looking to provide IT, hiring or IT services, then I'm not just looking at the individual I'm talking to. I'm thinking about the business. I'm thinking about the teams they work within as well. So we've got a better understanding of what that client is, that business is, and that person. The next thing I always see is those businesses and my clients are not solving fundamental problems. And let me just caveat that for a second. What I mean by not solving problems is, providing hiring expertise and finding the right candidates in the market is obviously problem solving. But what that doesn't get to is the root cause of why that hire is needed. And this is the same with every business challenge. It's the same with any opportunity. So if we're looking to expand, at the services that we're taking to market, or we're looking to increase revenue streams, everything has to relate back to a problem. If we're not solving problems, we're not adding value. And that's what we've got to get to the bottom of. So once we understand the client and we understand that stakeholder, we've now got to go a layer deeper. Well, what problems is that individual, is that business really facing for us to then service that client in the best way? And offering a candidate, going and finding a contractor or hiring a permanent individual, or rolling out some software, or rolling out some sort of service or product could well be the right thing to do. But what we have to do is formulate a much bigger understanding of that. That's all about problem solving. So what they're not doing is they're not pushing to uncover these problems. And this is a real common issue that I see across quite a lot of businesses. They're not able to consult with the client, have a more consultative conversation around the whys, the needs, the hows. It's our job in sales and revenue creation in any business, really. If you are not creating revenue, you are dying. Simple as that. And that all comes back down to the problem. In order for us to understand the problem, we have to question, we have to probe, we have to understand, we have to research, we have to reposition. And we do all this to better formulate an idea of how we can service them, how we can help them. So what I find a lot is the businesses that I work with just don't have the skills. They don't have the ability, the inclination. They're fearful of being pushed back. Well, why are you asking me why I need to hire a candidate? Why are you asking me why I need to develop this piece of software? Why are you asking me that I want to build this property? I want to extend this building, or I want to landscape my garden, for example. It's the same principle. What we have to do is reverse the problem in order to better service that client. And it may well come to the point where we can't service the client, right? And that's a key thing here. We should be mis-selling. Now, what this fundamentally leads into is an inability to expand the services, the products that you're offering to a client. So putting this back into the environment that I work across, again, recruitment. Historically, recruitment is offering up one of 2 or 3 products, all human-led. So that's placing candidates in a contract way or a permanent way or some sort of fractional way. But what that doesn't allow us to do is to add value beyond that candidate, that product, if you like. So what we limit is our ability to offer additional complementary value-added services. Additionally, by not looking at what the problem really is and understanding that problem and being able to reposition it with additional value and service and assurance and comfort, then we can't increase our prices. And that's a simple thing. We cannot increase our prices. We can't increase our market position. We can't increase our market worth to our client, to the rest of the industry, whoever we're servicing. So we have to look at providing a much more holistic view of servicing that client. Not necessarily today, but in the future. And one of the things I see very, very apparent certainly in recruitment is limited lifetime value of clients. Very, very transactional activities, really not great relationship-driven business. Customer retention is pretty poor. Yes, they'll have customers on their books for many, many years, but they're not active customers. If you're not servicing that customer every year, well, then that's a dead customer as far as I'm concerned. So why are you not servicing that customer? The lifetime value. And what we need to be doing is measuring that. And if you don't know what lifetime value is, it's quite a simple thought or calculation. It's whatever the amount of revenue that is being spent with that client over the total duration that they have been active. And by that, what I mean is just because you've got a client on your books who's been on your books since 2018, if you haven't serviced them in the last year, then they're not an active client. Simple as that. So how do we drive this year-on-year growth? And so when I'm going into a business, I'm looking at all those things. I'm looking at how can I push, penetrate, probe, understand what my client is doing, but crucially, what drives that is what their clients are doing. What's the market doing? What problems exist? Is there a way that I can look at servicing those problems in a different way? Is providing a contractor or a permanent hire the most suitable solution? It might not actually be. What it might actually be is, well, why don't we just upskill somebody internally? Why don't we just develop a coaching program? Why don't we partner with some education provider to upskill them? Now, you're possibly thinking, yeah, but I've just lost the revenue, right? What we've got to do is think bigger than the immediate deal. We're creating lifetime customer value. We want customers and clients to trust us. We want them to see us as their advisors, their partners. And not every deal is a yes. The power of no is really, really important here. But this all boils down to problem solving. And if you don't understand the problem, you can't add value. You can't add value, then you're going to limit your revenue. Yes, you can continue driving transactions, but you're fundamentally not going to be able to increase that position of what you're charging or how much you are capturing from within that client portfolio. And those are crucial things. Finding clients is hard enough. What I see all too often, if you've not heard of the 80-20 rule, what we want to be doing really is getting 80% of our business from 20% of our clients. But it's very often the other way around. And I'll give you an example of a business that I worked with over the past 3-4 years. So I went into an organisation, and I can't name any of my clients because I'm under NDA, very strict NDA for commercial reasons. But I can give you an idea of the type of business. So they're a fairly good size recruiter, about 50 to 60 heads, doing probably around 30-40 million of revenue, and they were struggling in the market, looking to really push new services, get into clients. So when I assessed this business and I looked at what they were doing and how they were working with their clients, what I found was they were onboarding every year 500 plus new clients. across many, many industries, some really, really good industries. But what I was finding is they were placing 1 or 2 individuals at most into these businesses, and then they would never service them again. And it's because they had this transactional mindset. So one of the things that I look to develop is a consultative mindset. How do we probe? How do we question? And that's been the basis of all my success. That's been the basis of how I've got all these businesses to generate more revenues, better margins. And when I talk about margins, maybe one for a future video is breaking down the whole commercial position. But I'm talking about taking businesses from 15, 16, 17% margins up to high 20s for the same type of interaction. But what changes is the dynamics. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's human nature to look at things from a price and value point. And it's a natural assumption that if something is more expensive, it must be better. It's not always the case, but it is. There's a reason why a Rolex is really expensive. It does the same job as my watch on my wrist. Bit of a different watch than a Rolex, but you get the principle. Some people buy the Rolex because of brand. It is clearly a very, very good watch, but it's that value point in the market. And what we find is, if businesses don't understand those points of how they're fixing problems, they're building intrinsic value with their clients, they're sowing the seed, they're becoming partners, not fulfillment. They're not just providing a service; they're actually delivering real value. Then how can you ever elevate your price position or your margin position? And unfortunately, I see it all too often, as I've said. I've worked with some really big companies. I've worked with multi-billion-dollar businesses doing this, all the way down to 1-2-man companies, and it is the same through and through. And so this framework that I try and get people to think about is take a new look at what you're servicing your clients with. Look at the problems you've got in front of you. Look at the services that you're taking to market or the products that you've created. Put those to one side. Now start asking your clients the questions around, the why. Why is that needed? What impact does that cause? What's going to happen if you don't get it done in time? If any of you have got any children, there's this, like I have, as my kids were growing up, there's this constant why. It's called the 5 whys. If you're not aware of it, maybe Google it. And it's the 5 whys of questioning. What we need to do is reverse the conversation back. And if we do that, then we're able to catapult our revenues and our margins up. So this is not about being new. It's not about creating shiny new products, trying to invent some new widget or whatever it is. Just do what you're doing now, but do it better. And in order to do it better, we need to service the client better. And in order to service the client better, we have to understand what problems they face. So hopefully this has been of interest to you. The intention for this channel is for me to share a bit more insight about, just business in general, what I do, how I help organizations transform. Just back to what I also do. So I've worked with hundreds of businesses over the years, very small to very large. I've personally been involved in well over 40 of those, getting them to one in excess of 300 million in total. So each one of those has achieved, $4, $5, $6 million new revenue. That's not increased services from their current business. That is net new revenue with higher margins. Some of those clients of mine have gone on to massively transform. Some of those clients have, stopped being a recruiter and become a consultancy business, or completely pivoted, in total. Some of those clients have gone on to exit and sell their businesses. But it all boils down to, there's a very simple approach to how you can grow and scale your business. The assumption is by this point you've got marketing going, you've got leads coming in, the market you're servicing. This is not about how you start a brand new business. This is about how you transform and elevate, accelerate your business, hence the accelerate and elevate piece that I talk about. So future videos will go into more detail, bring to life through some more case studies around how, maybe you can transform yours, right? If you've got any questions, I'd love to hear back from you. Drop a comment below. There'll be a link at some point if you want to have just a chat with me. Happy to help you in that way. But I'm just looking to really try and share some insight of all the things that I've learned across the many, many years, which is why I've got such grey hair. And yeah, hopefully this has been of value to you. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you'll come back again soon. Take care.